All right. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Hold on.
Hi,
Hi, Dr. Cate.
how are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
Good, I'm good. Thank you. So excited to be here. Oh, look at everyone joining in.
I know this is fantastic. So let's see here. Hold on one second.
It's gonna turn away from the window a little bit.
Awesome. So I'm going to make you a co-host here.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. Wonderful. And I'm just going to fix my preview. Awesome. All right. This is great.
All right.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. This is our very first Dharma Doctor community conversation. I'm Michael and I oversee partnerships here. These talks are our way of going beyond the product and to connect with the people using Dharma Doctor in the field, like Dr. Cate, and to explore what healing looks like from a real world relational lens. So today I'm joined by the brilliant Dr. Cayte Castrillon, certified sex therapist and an early adopting partner of Dharma Doctor. So Dr. Cate has been using the tabs in both her personal and professional work. And today we're diving into a topic that feels especially resonant, breaking conditioning and unlearning trauma narratives. So before we dive in, Dr. Cate, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of what drew you into the work that you're doing in the field.
So thank you so much, Michael, and for Brad for having me on. Like Michael said, I've been an early adopter of the Dharma Doctor tabs. I ordered them probably, I guess, last fall, and as soon as I got them, I started using them in my EMDR work and in my personal life, almost daily. I have been a psychotherapist for about 20 years and an EMDR practitioner since I think 2017. And as you can imagine, all the things that life has served up to us since 2017 has definitely created more and more of a need for trauma therapy, whether it's major traumas or just the experience of living life from 2020 on. So my original specialty was in eating disorders and disordered eating, body image issues, body dysmorphia. And as I started to help people heal through that experience, and I obviously identifying the traumas that people had experienced, either causing the adaptation of the eating disorders or the traumas that were experienced throughout the experience of having eating disorder, I learned that people were not having a healthy relationship with their bodies and their sexuality, and their relationships were suffering. So it really prompted me to go and get more training in helping people to reorient themselves into their body and subsequently into their sexual experiences with partners and even in their sexual experience of themselves. So it really inspired me to go and get more training in sex therapy, and I eventually got certified through AASECT in 2022, and I ended up getting my PhD in clinical sexology, specifically because I really believed the value of learning the narratives that people were gaining through their sexual conditioning early on in life, and then throughout the experience of having relationships in their adult lives. Those narratives are so profound and can be really powerful, but can be also really disempowering as well. So, my specific research was in the conditioning of media, specifically pornographic media, in relation to sex therapy for adolescent women. And I just was blown away by the information that I gathered through those interviews with the 58 women that I did very, very in-depth interviews with. And the research that came from that is still feeding my practice. So, just through the trauma lens, through the sex therapy lens, the Dharma Doctor tabs have been, you know, unreal. They've been tremendous.
And I can't wait to talk to you about that too, and hear a little bit more about your experience using them in your practice. But I'd love to kind of kick off. A lot of people here there's people from a therapeutic background. There's people like myself who may be sitting on the other end of the therapy chair, so to speak. So how would you define conditioning in the context of trauma and relationships, and how would you define that?
So when we experience trauma, in any sort of way, whether it's chronic trauma through, poverty or an abusive childhood, or even just, benign neglect, or if we experience like big T trauma, that we, kind of that vernacular that we use in the industry, acute traumas, sexual assault, major car accidents, natural disasters, we we experience that trauma somatically, in our body. That's kind of the body-based trauma. But then we also experience this kind of implicit trauma, the memories that we have about it, the narratives that we start to have about the event itself. It not only is a commentary on our past experiences, but it's also a commentary on how our life is going to turn out in the future. It's trauma tells us stories if we let it. Trauma tells us stories about our future and not just about what happened to us in the past. So we have the somatic based trauma that, I know Bessel van der Kolk did a lot of really tremendous work about, the body keeps the score, how we store trauma in the body. But then, my work is actually more about the implicit messages that we have about ourselves, about our relationships, that is informed by the trauma. And it creates the stories that we have. And then from those stories, we develop adaptations, whether that's defensiveness or isolation or, anything that we use to kind of adapt to the stories that we believe are true about ourselves in our world. And from those adaptations, anybody who has done even a minimal amount of work, reading about EMDR, we work with these kind of core beliefs, right? I am alone, I am unsafe, I am not good enough, and those are really kind of the I am statements that come from the adaptations that come from the trauma experiences, right? So there's this kind of linear relationship between the thing that happened to us and the way we believe we are in the world.
Yeah.
And, not only do, we have those beliefs from our trauma, unfortunately, we have those beliefs by how we exist in the world. The luck of how we were born, right? Where we were born geographically, what race we are, what gender we are, what kind of family we're born into. So I kind of look with my clients at what are the narratives that you have from just the luck of birth, and what are the narratives that you have from the trauma experiences that you have. And I try to blend those and really understand, okay, let's look at the entire story that you're telling yourself about how you exist in the world.
Yeah.
And let's see which one of those stories are really helpful, because some of them are, right? And
Yeah.
then let's see which ones of those stories are holding you back. And, we just kind of partialize it from there.
That's a lot to break into,
Yeah.
I mean, it is. It's incredible work what you're doing. I mean, how do you create a safe space for somebody to trying to kind of go into those feelings and even draw them out? You mentioned something like isolation being, a key component, something that somebody might do after experiencing trauma. I mean, even recognizing that, I imagine is a challenge.
Yeah.
It just kind of becomes their new existence. So yeah, I guess twofold question there. How do you draw those things out and create a safe space for somebody to really recognize them?
Hmm. So I think, a lot of therapy is about, it's not just about kind of coming in and dumping all of your experience. It's about developing the language to understand what you have been experiencing. What is, I hate when people come into therapy and they say, "Am I normal?" Right? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're normal because you're a human. You have moving body parts. You have a heart that beats. You have an experience that has led you to this place. So what what I do to kind of try to create that safe space when you're, as you're asking, Michael, is I do believe in, kind of appropriate self-disclosure. I think in our past conversations, I've said this to you, and it's something that I say to my clients a lot. I'm like, listen, we may not be in the same boat, but we're in the same ocean, right? I am very open with my clients when it's appropriate. Therapy is not about me. Like, this is not the time for my clients to hear about my life, but when it's appropriate and when I think it's going to give them a sense of perspective, I will experience with my clients a sharing of the emotional weight of certain experiences that they also might be going through, whether it's a relationship issue or, certainly this took shape during the pandemic, right? Like when we were all kind of experiencing the same chaos and distress that, my clients are pretty willing to ask questions. And I'm not one of these kind of super Freudian psychodynamic therapists where I'm like, I am a blank slate. You are not going to know anything about me. And I was fortunate enough in my graduate and postgraduate training to have mentors that really did facilitate their own open sharing, appropriate open sharing of experiences. And it really does create this space where your therapist is also a human being that has also experienced these things and may or may not have experienced some of the same traumas that you have, but definitely has experienced life. So I am definitely an imperfect being, and I bring to my clientele, my relationships with my clientele, like a very real, authentic experience. And I've had some really good fortune with that it's made my clients, and as per their report, it's made them feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah,
Kind of not have to be the perfect client. Because I think a lot of people come into therapy thinking they have to be the perfect client that's making all the progress, that's doing the EMDR correctly. And so I think knowing that there is no perfect, and that your therapist is not doesn't have it all together all the time either. It creates a freedom to really start diving into what they're struggling with.
that's probably a little more conditioning as well than we're experiencing just in that coming into therapy, wanting to be
Yeah.
the client.
Yeah.
Um, I know you incorporate so many different tools, CBT, DBT, EMDR, as well, somatic work in your practice. Like, how do you decide what to draw from in any given session? I imagine that's a lot of intuition at this point, a lot of experience, but I'd love for you to speak to that a little bit because it's a curiosity for me as well. Kind of going into appointments, like what to expect with somebody with such a diverse background too.
I think you're right. A lot of it is instinct, but again, it comes down to conversations with my clients because if I'm noticing patterns, I that's one thing that I do a lot is I really look for patterns in the relationships and how they talk about themselves in their therapy sessions, in the problems that they're bringing to therapy. If they're talking a lot about say a relationship where they're being hyper intellectual and their client and their partner or their child is very emotional and they just can't lean into the emotion, I'm probably not going to go the CBT route with that person because I'm trying to get them out of their head a little bit, right?
Huh.
Trying to kind of subvert the adaptations that we talked about earlier. I'm trying to subvert that and expose them in a safe way, in a safe space, in the room with me, to another way of operating. Right. We're going to
Okay.
look at what the adaptations are, and first I'm probably going to teach them, help them understand what is an adaptation, how is it possibly showing up in their life, right? Are they highly defensive? Are they tending to shy away from experiences where their vulnerability is on display? Do they hyper intellectualize? Like these are all adaptations that I'm probably going to be having to teach them about and expose them to and make them more aware of in their everyday life. And then from there, we're going to start to look at how can we maybe change the script on how these adaptations are helpful and maybe where they're not so helpful. Because if
Mhm.
they're the survival mechanisms that they've used to get to this point in their life, then they've obviously worked to some extent, right?
Sure.
I don't want to ever say, like how you've been doing everything is wrong, right? Like that's not my intention at all. But what I do want to do is expose them to the possibility that there might be some limitations to how that survival mechanism has worked,
Yeah.
and to maybe start to look at how we can introduce new techniques that maybe aren't just about survival, that they're maybe about actually like living a bigger, fuller, more vulnerable experience. So from there, I'm going to discuss with them the benefits of, if we get more into your body, this might be what happens, right? If we do somatic work, if we start to express some of this vulnerability, some of this trauma that you've been so protective of, this might happen, right? Like these might be the positive benefits, and this might be some of the difficulty. If we're using DBT skills, there's going to be some, exposure to emotional dysregulation that they might have to, kind of, to just use a DBT term, like have some radical acceptance of the fact that they might not have control over X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
If they are so emotional and they're so catastrophic in their thinking, CBT might be helpful because it might give them more of a way to use some top-down control, as opposed to like letting their body and letting their emotions really take over. And of course, EMDR, is usually my go-to. I'm very biased, but it's usually my go-to when we have very discrete traumas like sexual trauma and car accidents. My vets, I use a lot of EMDR with, and even people that have a little bit more chronic experiences where there's kind of an overall sense of neglect and disempowerment. I find that even though EMDR is really meant to be used for discrete traumas, I do find that it is very helpful, kind of rewiring those narratives around abandonment and things like that.
Heard a lot of that as well. I think that, for somebody who is new in a lot of ways to EMDR, even just a couple years for me, a couple years ago for myself, I was looking into it for a partner of mine, but it seems very inaccessible and confusing to the average person if you're not maybe going in with severe trauma.
Mm.
And the more that I've learned about EMDR, the more transformative I'm realizing that it is for just your everyday person who may even just be struggling with some of those narratives, to draw some of that out. And EMDR, even prior to that, as well, a component of it being, bilateral stimulation and using that in everyday life. And that's made a huge difference for me personally, just having the tabs and using those. I used them today before this, to kind of calm my nervous system, which is great. And so they're amazing to have on hand. I'd love to hear your experience with that too, and kind of how you're incorporating them into your everyday work and what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that EMDR might seem inaccessible to people that are maybe undermining their own experience of trauma. I'll share with everybody my first experience with EMDR. I had been working with a therapist since I had my daughter in 2009. And I had been working with a therapist since she was around like 1.5, 2. I started to have like incredible anxiety about her safety, and just when they start kind of like running away from you a lot, you start, as a parent, start freaking out, right? You can't control their environment. And I started to have some really intense panic attacks around, I shouldn't say panic attacks because I don't think they really rose to the occasion of panic attacks, but it was some pretty severe anxiety around bath time because she was a terrible sleeper and she would not go to sleep, and it would be a battle royale every single night. And I knew it started around bath time, and I would start to get really anxious. And so when I started to talk to my therapist about it, she's like, I think we could do some EMDR around this. And I was like, come on, this is not trauma. Like, this is ridiculous. And this is before I had been trained in it. It took 2 EMDR sessions for me to kind of believe in the stability and the strength of my parenting, and in my own kind of calm, the impact of being able to stay calm in the face of a whirlwind Tasmanian devil, like 3-year-old, right? So
Sure.
just the experience, which kind of brings me to, a larger answer to your question, just the experience of using the tabs in like a meditative state, which essentially was what she did in those EMDR sessions. We did, I don't know if you're familiar with John Kabat-Zinn's mountain meditation.
Yeah.
And she just did some, after we identified kind of my core beliefs and, the fact that I felt out of control and, all the stuff that, new parents, and in my case, like intellectual parents feel when they just know that they have to let go of all the expectations of being able to know everything. She basically did the mountain meditation with me using the bilateral stimulation. At the time, she did not have, this many years ago, we didn't have the wireless tabs, but and it took 2 sessions and I felt completely different. I had a totally different perspective of myself in those moments that, I still to this day, when, now I have a teenager and, I still to this day will kind of imagine that mountain meditation and just say, okay, like, listen, the winds can whirl around me, but I am not moving. I am strong. I'm steady. I'm capable. And that's something that when, whether it's my teenager that's whirling around me or life is whirling around me or just my own kind of anxieties around my career, whatever things I'm doing, that's something that I still utilize. And I think because it has such a deep root in my therapy experience, it's such a powerful method for me to use to just like calm myself down. So that's my first experience with EMDR, and to extend it to my current practice with the tabs, my meditations have been kind of supercharged with the tabs. And I think I posted a story the other day that I just got back into doing my TM meditations. And even though that's a very different one than, say, like a mindfulness meditation, anything that really grounds you somatically, especially if you're a person like me that often is very hyper intellectualized, like grounding in a physical sense is so powerful. So, I like can't say enough about the tabs because I think they can be used in so many different modalities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They are a fantastic grounding tool for anybody who has that monkey mind during meditation. I highly recommend. Really helps you just kind of get out of your head and helps kind of mitigate that stress switch too in the hyper kind of fight or flight moments. Or maybe when you're having a little bit of nerves before a presentation. So, or just a live discussion. So, thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
Um, so, how do you help clients kind of reconnect with their body in a way that feels safe? I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, but the difference between sexuality and sensuality, I think, is something that we've spoken about quite a bit as well.
Yeah. So I think, and I don't deign to understand quite the history of the fear around sexuality. I think, because I am very biased. I've been probably, even though I was raised in a very conservative kind of Catholic household, my parents were not, traditional. I would say like, even though they kind of were young adults at that time. They were not traditional, like, hippie types. They were like very kind of square 50s type parents and, boomers. I'm like, Dad, you're such a boomer. But I definitely was, for whatever reason, turned out to be a person that was very comfortable talking about sexuality and relationships. And so I think when I got to be an adult in working in my therapy practice, it was just so natural to me to understand and to be comfortable rather talking about sex and relationships. But so it came to the point where I had to kind of be reminded by some of my clients and, just by kind of doing my own research that this is a very unusual experience for a therapist to be so open talking about it, so willing to ask questions. So it kind of reminded me that I had to pull back and be more aware of, the implicit, discomfort that clients might have. So I had to kind of think about, um, let's look at it another way. Let's kind of come at it from a different standpoint that might be a little bit more comfortable. It might be a little bit less intimidating. So I started looking at the difference between sexuality and sensuality. And sensuality, it not isn't necessarily about sex. It's about our connection to our senses, our five senses and our kind of spiritual sense, right? Like if we think about that sixth sense of just being kind of calm or whatever emotional state we're in, I can often use it as an example of like we can look at that as like a sixth sense for our clients. And once we start talking about how comfortable people are in their sensuality, I usually can start to make some inferences with how they end up being comfortable or uncomfortable in their sexuality. And, as far as we're looking at it through the lens of trauma, traumatic experiences are connected so much to our sensual experience. What we see, what we hear, what we smell. So
Yeah.
many times when I'm doing EMDR with my clients or when I'm doing somatic experiencing with my clients to work through, or even, the exposure exercises, kind of progressive exposure. So many times they talk about sensory experiences, the smells. Olfactory experience is so linked to trauma and also to positive experiences, right?
Right.
So being able to really explore the sensual experiences that we have, both in, really positive experiences where we can use those positive experiences to resource and ground our clients as like a safe, calm place, or just as a way to kind of reorient a client after a really difficult session. I have a lot of sensory tools in my office, like candles and soft pillows and just, different sensory experiences that my clients use as kind of like a regrounding. And obviously the tabs also is very helpful. But sensuality is such a great conversation point to bring us from not being attached at all to our personal bodily experience to reattaching completely. I think in this world where we are just so overwhelmed by stimuli, it's so easy to numb out,
Yeah.
right? And that's so much of meditation, right? It's being able to kind of reconnect to even like a walking meditation. A lot of times especially as in New Jersey, we're getting a little nicer weather. I can take my clients on like a walk and talk therapy session. And so often I just let the silence kind of fall in, and my clients will start to notice like a bird or a sound or a smell or just the light and the greenery on the trees. And then I'll use that as an entree into a conversation about sensual experience and how that noticing makes them feel different. And even if that's not the direction of the conversation, 9 times out of 10, if a client is outside and we're talking and we're walking and we're, you know, using that kind of different setting, a lot of times it'll just lend itself to a much better conversation. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're like reconnecting to a different sensual experience than they are just in my office or, over Zoom, if they haven't been able to come in.
No, that's amazing. I wish that more therapists would do that walk and talk therapy.
And it's also incorporating the bilateral stimulation, right? Like that's Francine Shapiro, that's how she came up with it, right? And I think a lot of us forget that.
As a therapist and human yourself, how do you address stress and overwhelm yourself? Like, how do you go about dealing with these things as you come across them?
Hmm. So it's I'm definitely like I'm a highly strung person, right? Like I'm a doer. I'm go 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 all the time, and I'm also a mom, and my daughter plays volleyball, so we're traveling all the time, and so I do have to like literally I put reminders in my phone to kind of breathe or to do a meditation or to take a walk. And thankfully it becomes kind of more ritualized where I do it even without sometimes needing the reminders. But I don't ever take for granted that my kind of personal emotional state is going to default to being able to relax, right? Like, because I'm constantly going, I have so many things going on that I have no shame in saying like, I have to be reminded, and I have a wonderful partner who is also really good at reminding me, and he's very intuitive, so he can tell if like um my kind of like tuning needs to be reworked a little bit. So he's like he'll feel my emotion. He's like, wait a minute, you like, do you need to go upstairs and meditate? So, and like I also don't overthink, I try not to overthink how to do that. Like even if it's just five
Yeah,
minutes, right? Even if it's just 5 minutes, take the tappers, go on a walk, reconnect with some sort of sensual kind of like, looking out on the horizon. I try not to kind of overthink it too much too, because I know that it's not always realistic to take 20 minutes to meditate, right?
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so I try to use myself as a kind of guinea pig to practice like the little kind of nuggets of or the little snacks of relaxation, and use that as a reminder to my clients. Say, listen, like I get it. I get that it's not going to be realistic for you to sit down and meditate for 15, 20 minutes a day. But listen to what works here. Like let's try this. So yeah, I'm definitely someone that has to practice and remind myself.
And it's good to have those mirrors too, as you said, with your partners, with your parents, your friends. Anytime I was at home, back living with my parents for a while, anytime I was overwhelmed, my dad would always say, go outside and feel the sun on your face. Take a moment, go take some breaths, go feel the sun on your face, go breathe some air, and it works. It works. So I will say, that, and two, having my partner now being that mirror for me when I am kind of falling into that state has been really helpful. So thank you for speaking to that too.
Yeah.
So I want to leave a few minutes for some questions. Guys, if you have, thank you all so much for joining us. And we have several people on the call. If you had any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat, and we'll jump there as well. Until then, I'm going to keep going because I have many questions for you. But just wanted to remind everybody that, yes, please go ahead and feel free to drop your questions. Or frankly, if you'd like to jump on video and ask them, we'd love to engage with you
Oh,
directly too.
please.
So that's also an option, but whatever everybody feels comfortable with. So, well, just to kind of keep going here, what's a common myth or misunderstanding about trauma healing that you'd love to clear up?
Oh my goodness, that's a big one. Well,
No.
I think, just broadly speaking, I want to address the connection between trauma healing and because I happen to be a sex therapist, trauma healing and sexuality, right? Because I think we are given this narrative, again, speaking about narratives and conventions, that if you have, any sort of physical, sexual, emotional abuse, that you are de facto broken in your relationships. And, I think that's absolutely 1000% the most misunderstood element of trauma healing, because just like being highly sensitive isn't a um, disadvantage. I was searching for the word. It oftentimes is actually a superpower. So I think that if you can kind of really understand your trauma experience and the adaptations that came from it and see how it undermines your relationship sexually to yourself and to your partners, it gives you such a great jumping off point to understand how you can overcome that and make it its own superpower. Obviously there's going to be a lot of work that goes into kind of understanding how your trauma created a narrative that may have created an adaptation. But I really want to address the highly problematic belief that if you have trauma, that there's no way that you can readdress your sexuality. Because I've knock on wood, I've been really, really lucky that in the 20 years that I've been doing this work, I've never had somebody that was not able to reclaim some semblance of their sexuality. And I've worked with a lot of people that have experienced trauma.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um,
Did I see a question pop up on the chat?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Okay, so let's see. Angelina, so she says, I'm new to these specific tappers. Any one-on-one tips for using these with kids just to start?
Oh, yeah.
It's new to EMDR and these tappers. Dr. Cayte, do you want to take that?
I do. Angelina. Oh, I love that name. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I actually, as I mentioned, I have a 15-year-old. She's a volleyball player, and God bless her, she has been um, subject to all manner of therapeutic interventions. I've kind of made a promise to myself when I became a mom that I was not going to be like a therapy mom, but just because I've do these things to myself for stress release, I've naturally taught her how to do some of these things. So I think, I've kind of gone back on that promise in some capacity. But I do want to say these tappers, um, for her, she's been very kind of resistant. Obviously, most teenagers are to, believing that mom knows anything about stress release. And I just said to her one day in January, she had for her first tournament, a 3-day tournament of the year. And I was like, listen, I just got these tappers a couple months ago. Like, just try them. I just want to see how they work to kind of get you a little bit less vibrating, right? She was vibrating. She's a totally new position. And she's, super competitive, very hard on herself. I said, just like 5 minutes, just sit. Don't do anything. Don't try to think anything. Let's just see how you feel. And I asked her, I was like, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, like how vibraty do you feel? Like this is literally how I asked her the question. And she's like, I feel like an 8, I think. And so when I said, like, all right, I'm just gonna leave you in the hotel room. I'm gonna go down the hall. Just hold them on your thigh with your palms on top of them for like 5 minutes. And I came back and I was like, all right, honest to goodness, like tell me how vibrating you feel. And she definitely said, she's like, it's down around a 3 or a 4. So I have continued to do that before every game. It just has helped her to she has a hard time putting language to it, but I think for her, it's just allowed her to kind of get back into her body and get into that kind of athletic flow state that is so necessary with the focus that they need for an athletic event. And I would imagine, although she won't let me try it, when she's stressing out about homework or when she's stressing out about just being a teenager, I would imagine that if you have a kid who's open to it, that it would help in the same way. So that's just been my experience with a teenager. But if you have a kid that's open to trying it and just literally just holding it on their thigh or holding it in their hands, I'm sure it would be really beneficial, especially with the little ones, I would imagine, because they're so somatic.
Mhm.
Little ones, they're not in their heads yet. So
Awesome. Thank
how
you.
old is your little one, Angelina? I'll
And
let you tell
Angelina,
it.
feel free to
He-
come on video too. Yeah.
well, I have a 2.5 to 1 year olds, and then I work with kids too.
Oh my
So
goodness.
looking forward to using it with all of the kids.
Oh my goodness.
So thank you. That was great.
They're probably going to fight over them.
Yes. Good thing there's 2. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Thank you for your question too. Guys, we have some amazing people in the audience here. Feel free to pop on, ask your questions if you'd like. We'd love to hear from you. Well, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but all right, I've got a great question for you, Dr. Cayte.
Go for it.
What's something that you're currently unlearning?
Ooh, okay. I am a recovering people pleaser, and I definitely I'm the youngest of four. And I think you and Michael and I have had some really wonderful, kind of very personal conversations, and I feel like I've gained a friend just in the short time that we've known each other. But I am the youngest of four, and I was always kind of like I feel like we were kind of all put in categories, and I was like the smart one. I was the good one and I was the smart one, right? I was the book learner. My siblings are all really intelligent, but I was like the book learner. I was always got the good grades, and I was always the well-behaved one, right? I think because I was young enough to kind of see how much trouble my older siblings were getting in, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. But it starts to kind of create an identity, right? When you have to be, or when I thought I had to be, the one who followed all the rules, right? The one who did everything correctly, the one who got all the A's. And that starts to develop into an entire full-blown identity of being the person who doesn't upset anyone or doesn't disappoint anyone. And I learned something a couple of years ago that was a really big game changer for me. And it was something that I had to unlearn, that guilt is not disappointing people. Guilt is only a valuable emotion when you are living outside of your value,
Mm,
right? You're living outside of like your values or your value like characteristics, right? If I go to a store and I just treat somebody like poorly for no reason, I should feel guilty, right? Because my value is being a kind person. My value is being compassionate and being considerate to people. So if I'm just a jerk to somebody for no reason, I should feel guilty, right? But if I go and I advocate for myself in a situation, and my advocacy causes disruption to somebody else's expectations of me, or they're disappointed in what I'm asking for, or they are they're somehow what's the word I want to use? They're inconvenienced in some way.
yeah.
I shouldn't feel guilty about that, right? And I think my kind of people-pleasing nature that I gained as the conventions that I followed as a child and into my young adulthood, I really started to conflate being assertive with my needs with feeling guilty.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that I was really, and I have been unlearning. And I've been constantly like, I'll feel that kind of pit in the center of my stomach of like when I'm possibly going to inconvenience somebody or possibly going to make them upset because I'm advocating for myself, that's not guilt, it's fear of what they're going to think about me.
Yeah.
And I've had to really tease that apart, that, guilt is meant to keep us from acting outside of our values. But fear is going to happen regardless of what we're doing, even if it's, within our values, but if it's challenging what we think other people are going to think about us, right? Like
Yeah.
that core belief of like, I am I'm not worth it, or I need to be acting in this specific way. Like that's when fear creeps up. And we have to really look at that fear in the face and say, is that fear because it's actually dangerous? Or is it just because it's uncomfortable?
Mhm.
So am I unsafe, or am I just uncomfortable? And so I think that's what I've been spending a lot of time on learning. And it comes up in so many areas of my life that I never would have even anticipated. Right.
Yeah. Great, great one to leave on too. Thank you. um, I've been taking notes, and I know this call is being recorded. So, thank you for all of these insights.
Cool.
um,
Oh,
guys, I want to give everybody one more chance. If you have any other questions, now is the chance. We'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you can't think of them now, but they come up later, we'll let you know how to find Dr. Cayte as well, and how you can get in touch with us too. I also wanted to mention that I know a lot of you are waiting on tabs. Tabs are back in stock. They are shipping now. So those are going out this week. If you have any questions, reach out to myself, Brad, Q, my team. We're happy to help you. See, we just got a question here. Can you remind me when to use the tabs and how do you determine the speed? Sure. So when you use the tabs, so I guess that's really, to each his own, I suppose. Like when in those situations, if you're using them for stress or anxiety, however this comes up for you, and the speed itself, the way that I've learned from talking with Dr. Saren and using them myself is kind of go with what feels comfortable. We usually tell people to start at a lower speed. If you use the tabs in manual mode, there's actually these two. These are buttons, these two symbols, so you can turn them on, and then you can toggle through two different speed and intensities, or three different speeds, two different intensities with the tabs, and kind of just play with that. I'd maybe sit down, close your eyes, and see what feels comfortable. Now that's how I would answer it, Dr. Cayte. Do you have any additional insights there?
Yeah, I like to do if I am feeling sluggish, you answered it as best as I would have possibly answered it, as far as like the beginner kind of on entry point. But I have Angelina also use it when I'm a little sluggish, when I haven't maybe had the greatest sleep. I've put them on a faster speed, and it actually kind of activates me a little bit. So it might be something that if you are experiencing, fatigue, or if you just are just low energy, you might want to experiment with like a higher speed, and do shorter intervals, because I wouldn't want you to kind of get too activated, and you can just see how you feel. But yeah, I would definitely have answered it the same way you did, Michael, as far as kind of starting off slower and seeing how you feel.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for being here. This has been such a great conversation with you. I always enjoy talking with you. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what's coming down the pike and kind of what's next for Dr. Cayte and how to find you on social as well.
Absolutely. So I am Communicate, Cayte, like my first name, on Instagram. And you can find me at Dr. Cayte Castrillon on LinkedIn. And I have actually a show coming up called Real Love on This Is It Network. It's a new network that is dedicated to education for women by women, but we also have some men that are going to be hosting shows. So I will be hosting a show called Real Love, and we are going to be looking at the conditioning and the messaging that we get from movies, television, media, that some of the lessons are great, some of the lessons are not so great. And it's going to be an interview-based show where I'm just going to be talking to people, in a talk show format, just to understand like their experience with sexuality and the lessons that they've learned along the way. So we'll be starting to film those next month, and the show will be rolling out this summer. So again, it's This Is It Network. The apps are available for download already on Apple and Roku and Fire Stick and Android and all the places. And it's going to be a really great network. There's 28 shows getting rolled out on the network, all in different categories, from fashion to sex and relationships to business, entrepreneurship, and everything. So definitely check it out. It's a fantastic resource.
I can't wait to check it out. And congratulations. That is so exciting. I cannot wait to see you hosting that. You're going to be amazing.
I'm so excited. It's going to be great. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of fun.
I believe it. I mean, they couldn't have asked for a better host. So,
Michael, thank you.
Cayte, you're amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, everybody in the audience who joined us today. If you guys have any lingering questions, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Also, drop us a follow on Instagram. We're My Dharma Doctor. We'll be sharing some highlights as well. So really appreciate you guys jumping on today, and we will do this again next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.